Working with stained glass is an old and fragile art, and it's something that our next artist, Andy Young, has studied for years. You could say that the art form has been his window of opportunity.
Being a stained glass artist, it's really hard to describe because you have this historical component of stained glass that goes back 1,000 years or longer. Whenever I'm designing in a window, designing for a window, I'm always aware of the tradition of stained glass and what's gone on in the past, and I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of all these people that have been working in windows for 1,000 years. You know, I think that stained glass is an unsung hero of the visual arts. It has such a capacity to express emotion and feeling. It deals with light in a way that's unique. Because it had its birth in the Gothic cathedral of Northern Europe, I think people have always associated stained glass windows with the church, the Christian church particularly. And over the years, I think that relationship has been maintained so that there's always been a place for stained glass to exist. There's always been a home for stained glass, and that's in the church. When you walk into a building and you see colored windows, immediately it's almost in people's DNA, you know, that we're in a church building because of this color and light. And I believe that stained glass lends itself to this sort of expression of the human emotion and spirit, if you will, because it's dealing with light and color in a way that's very kind of fundamental. There's so much about what I do that's indescribable. I think that language oftentimes is so limiting when you try to describe aesthetic issues, because what we do is visual. You know, how do you take this visual medium and then translate it into language? The language is just not there for me sometimes to describe the subtleties of all that I'm trying to get at in my work, because it's so different than any other artistic medium.
And joining us now in the studio is Andy Young. Andy, welcome to Southern Expressions.
Thank you.
You're probably not surprised to learn that you're our first stained glass artist to be on Southern Expressions.
Well, that's quite an honor. I appreciate that.
There just aren't too many of you around anymore, isn't that true?
That's very true. That's very true.
Not that you're a dying breed or that it's a dying art or anything.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, stained glass has a very special niche, so there's not a lot of people that pursue it as a career. So we are kind of rare but locally abundant kind of a thing, you know. So.
But you would like to see that change. I mean, you're very passionate in speaking with you about stained glass as an art form.
That's true. I think that not many people have taken on stained glass as an art form and have used it for all the different possibilities that it has. And so, you know, as an artist working in glass, I've had that opportunity over the years to explore and to investigate some really exciting themes and ideas as a designer and an artist, and it's been a real full life, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. What is it that brought you to the stained glass? What interested you first?
Well, I think that it was the ability to work with my hands, because I'm a craftsman. I like to get busy and process. I like to make things. That was always the easy way out. And when I was failing English in high school, was to make some kind of really great little wooden project that was, the teacher loved it. So I found out early on that I was good at, you know, making things and projects. And so when I was in school, I studied stained glass, and just it seemed to click, you know, with my interest in being an artist, but also wanting to make things.
At school where?
I was at LSU and graduated in 1975.
And it took hold right there?
Well, when I came back from school, I opened up a small shop. I rented a garage behind an antique store on North State Street in Jackson, and started making stained glass windows and hung out my shingle, and I've been doing it full-time ever since.
Let's take a look at the process and take us through this to show us from the sketches very early on. What is it that you're looking for? Obviously you have, especially when you're doing a window, some limitations.
Yeah, what we're looking at here is a design sketch for the Great Commission theme for Christ United Methodist Church in Jackson. And we did a series of stained glass windows and completed them last year. And this shows the notes around the perimeter. The Great Commission was when in the gospel Christ commissions the apostles to go out and spread the word of the gospel. And normally what I do is I'll go back to the scripture and make notes about things that strike me as visuals. And in this particular composition, you can see the boat form, since Christ was the fisherman of men and so many of the early disciples were fishermen. And then there's also the oars form, the shape of the Cairo, which is an ancient Christian symbol. So a lot of times when I'm working on the designs, there's the entire history of stained glass at my disposal as a designer. I've got all this history and tradition that I can borrow from, and then as a designer, then I have my own inspiration, my own ideas and traditions that I've developed over the last 35 years working with glass.
Well, let's go through the process again. We saw you saw the sketch, and then you also, do you choose the colors on paper first, or do you know what's and how different is the color that you imagine from the color that actually the light really comes through it?
Yeah, exactly. In the at the studio, we have a saying that the window looks just like the rendering. You know, we have this kind of saying that when we get through, a lot of times now, we've been able to practice our craft long enough that I'm familiar with the materials and the colors and what I have available to fabricate into a stained glass window. And so now I can design for that. The color is the most important, component to get right. And then the design form, because you're dealing with pieces, a stained glass window is a collection of different shapes. So I'm interested in shape and line because of the lead work. I'm interested in texture and also color. It's a great medium for a designer and an artist because you have the basic art elements that you're manipulating every time you set out to do a project. So they're all different, and yet they're all the same.
Let's go to North Carolina, where you have a stained glass window. Where is this? And this seems like a more updated, contemporary design.
Yeah. This was a great project. We were invited to come to North Carolina to a retirement village in Asheville, where we designed stained glass windows for the chapel, and we worked real closely with a great group of administrators and also members from the community were on the committee. And we went round and around on design ideas and concepts, and believe that we came out with a very worthwhile project. And I've gotten really great feedback from the members and how much the windows mean to them. And so part of the process that I work with is inviting the people that will view the windows to be part of that design process so that they have some ownership. And it's really important. The window that you're looking at there describes a great deal of what I've learned in stained glass. If you'll notice, there's the tree with the text on it, and then there's a fall color theme in the background, but there's some more transparent glass that you're actually seeing the Smoky Mountains through. The Appalachian Mountains are seen through the background of the glass, which reinforces the theme. And we've been doing a number of projects recently where we've had a chance to bring the decorative qualities of glass, the aesthetic qualities of glass into different commercial applications.
We have some examples of that. This dove at St. Dominic's.
Yes, this is one of my favorite themes. When I was there at the lobby at St. Dominic's taking the photograph, Sister Dorothea came up, she's the director of the hospital, and said how much that window has moved people and how much they've gotten from the symbol of the spirit of the dove with the gold and the nimbus and all of that. And it was quite a challenge because they wanted me to do artwork on a wall that didn't have any light. So the light that you see is actually reflected from windows opposite the registration desk, the entrance desk. And that's glass that's been formed in a kiln at real high temperatures and then we've taken gold leaf, in this particular case white gold, and applied it to the back to make a mirrored surface. So it has this really beautiful reflective quality from the natural light that's there.
Let's take a look at one of your paintings here. And this, not surprisingly, looks an awful lot like what you would use in stained glass.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a period a few years ago when I decided, okay, you're kind of approaching the end game here. You need to kind of narrow down all the different ideas that you've got into one recognizable body of work. And that's when I started to take the rendering techniques that I've developed in stained glass and started to do that also in the painting. And this was done for an exhibition at the Mississippi Library Commission last June. And it's an abstract painting piece of a tree. And trees are some of my, I guess that has something to do with my landscape interest, is plants and trees are things that I love. So it's a subject matter that I use, but you can see the color. It's painted on, it's paper with gesso, and the gesso is a very, very bright white paint, and I do transparent layers of color on that, like transparent layers of glass on white light. So the rendering technique that I'm using here is very much, in my mind, like making a stained glass window.
Will we see this as a stained glass window at some point in time? Or the ideas behind it anyway?
Yeah, I think so. When I'm doing these, I'm really doing a lot of color work. I'm doing a lot of color investigation because lately I've been working on complementary colors where if you notice there's orange and blue, which would be colors opposite each other on the color wheel. I guess you could, well, I don't know, talk about the color wheel, but the color wheel is a kind of abstract concept anyway. But it's complementary colors, and so I investigate ideas in paintings that I wouldn't necessarily do right away in a stained glass window.
What about the Welty House? What can you tell me about this this drawing or this painting?
This is very recently done for the Highland Gallery in Jackson. Had a theme show based on Eudora Welty to help with the process of celebrating her 100th birthday. And this was a work that I did by sitting at the home of Eudora one late evening when the sun was setting, and it was the light kept getting darker and darker, and I couldn't hardly see anything by the end. But you notice there's a figure in there, and that figure is actually a photograph that Eudora took when she was doing her photography work early on. And I borrowed that image and did a collage of it on the paper before I started painting, and then went over there and did this painting series. And it really, that work probably captures as much about my painting style as anything that you could see, really.
Well, Andy Young, thank you for joining us on Southern Expressions. It's been very, very nice.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Southern Expressions. We'll see you next week.